Welcome to the podcast studio. So here at Podcast Studio AZ, I'm going to give you a tour because this was something that I watched so many YouTube videos of, was the exact setup and build out that people have done for their podcast studios. I want to show you all the equipment we use in a $15,000 podcast studio setup, what you can expect, what things you should save money on, what things you shouldn't try to skimp out on. We have 3 different sets. I'll show you the equipment and the breakdown. So let's get into it. All right, so welcome to the studio today. I'm gonna give you a tour and show you all of the equipment that we currently use in this $15,000 podcast studio, everything that we put into it, how we run the whole system, to hopefully give you some ideas if you're interested in getting a podcast started, interested in getting a studio started, everything that you need to know essentially. So I'm gonna start by talking about the cameras, we'll do mics, we'll do equipment, and then we'll even talk about the sets and lighting and everything else. So the first thing I wanna talk about is right here we have what is called Mega Desk. So in the past, I've done studios and podcasts where I had tripods everywhere. It drove me crazy. It's so annoying having to tear down and put up everything every single time. So we decided to build a desk with everything that we have in the studio strapped to it. We have 3 different sets and we can just roll this thing into different rooms and we don't have to redo anything. All of our settings, all of our equipment, everything's there. So Mega Desk has been a lifesaver. This desk itself is actually just from Home Depot. It's built by Husky and it raises and lowers. It's got a little crank on the front of the desk. So usually we have this lower, but if we want, we can raise and lower it. So it is really convenient. You would raise it if you were going to do like some sort of standing kind of like presentation, but for everything that we do at the studio, you can see the set behind me with couches and stuff. This is all just done in its current position. So the first thing I want to talk about is the cameras. So right now we currently have 3 cameras. They're all the exact same. They're the Sony ZV-E10s. Now you can notice there's this monstrosity strapped to the back of them. What we found with these is the cameras fairly decent. You can definitely get better if you're looking at something like a Sony FX30, but these ones are doing the trick for us. They have a pretty clean shot, and the reason we went with these instead is because the body of these is like $300-400, and an FX30 is like $1,800 for the body. So you save money here. The big problem with these, obviously the FX30 is a much better camera for many reasons, but these work. But the main problem we had with them is overheating. And so what we were able to do, something like an FX30 has a fan built in, which solves that problem. We have just strapped these $20 fans on. They're a USB-C. It just plugs right into the front of the fan, and you're able to just push a button, turn this thing on. Now, I will say this particular fan is quite annoying because it has these suction cups to strap it on. I am not a fan at all of that. They fall off all the time, and I ended up getting Velcro that just permanently holds it. So you can see it's a little loose, but the fan does the job. There's a newer version of this that has a spring that clamps it in and it doesn't move. It's also black, so it matches. It looks like it's actually meant to be with the camera. If you're gonna get it, I'll throw a link and I'll throw it up on the screen or whatever, but I would definitely get the newer versions of these fans, and you can 100% get away with this camera and this setup if that's what you wanna do. So what you'll notice is in the set for the cameras, usually we have a camera strapped right here. We have a 3-camera setup. We actually have this camera pulled off and it's what's filming everything right now. So you'll see essentially the camera quality and everything that we have going on. You'll notice though, with all of the cameras, we have them strapped to the table with these Elgato these Elgato mic arms. These things are amazing. In the past, we've done tripods and stuff, but having these be able to clamp straight to the table makes it so that they can slide in the cameras on this and you can just scooch this around wherever you want. The other nice thing about them is that they swivel all the way out. So you can have the camera on the end here. If you need to raise it up, you really have a lot of mobility with these. And so they're awesome because you can get some pretty wide diversity of your shots from having one pulled out on this side, having one over on this side of the table, and this one's all the way pulled out. And then we have this middle one, which is, this one doesn't really change the position very much. The main thing that this is for is the lens on here can zoom. So we just have this one zoomed out as much as possible to try to capture the entire set. And then these side ones, they have a lens that is more zoomed in close up on the guest. It doesn't have zoom. So you essentially have to use this and pull it back if you want to zoom back, or push it forward if you want to zoom forward. We haven't really had a problem with that. But overall, these work great, and the lenses, I'll throw links up to the lenses on the screen. but these lenses have done well for us. We have a TV here in the studio that is on rolling wheels, and this thing is great. We essentially will usually put this right behind one of the cameras at the desk. So we try to position the camera to be about the middle of the TV. And if a guest has, like, for myself personally, with my podcast, I cover news. So if I'll have the news up and the camera's right here and I'm looking at the TV, it looks pretty much like I'm looking at the camera. So this replaces a teleprompter. You can also put your script on there. We have a Bluetooth mouse and keyboard that we have attached to the laptop that this plugs into. And so if someone has like a script up, as long as you have your script like right above the level of the camera and you're kind of scrolling to keep it there, it's gonna look like you're pretty much staring straight at the camera. So this TV is awesome. I've been a big fan of that. The only thing I will say with the TV is sometimes if you're on like a website, for example, and the whole background of this is white, the LED that comes off of the TV can create a bit of a shimmer effect on some of your footage. So I typically tell guests if they're going to pull up a script or something to try to put on like a black background screen, and you're going to essentially get rid of that issue. You'll notice that we're using the exact same mic arms back here for the rest of the set, the Elgato mic arms, and they swivel, they're great, everything straps in. Now, I've seen older reviews, I'll come up to this one that's a little bit closer here for you, but I've seen older reviews of these Elgato mic arms that say they complain about this clamp right here. All the cables can go in here, which is really convenient. There's holes in the bottom. They've heard them complain about the magnets on these not being strong enough. They just have a new version, so if you're gonna go buy these on Amazon, you'll get the latest version. Don't buy the used ones. That was my mistake. I was like, oh, look, it's like 10 bucks or 20 bucks off on these because they're like $100. If you go get the used one, the magnet's not strong enough and this thing will pop off all the time. So get the brand new one. The magnet's super strong. It's gonna clamp on, not pop off for you, not annoy you. Otherwise, these things are amazing. I have no complaints with them. Yeah, really great piece of equipment. For the microphones, when I first started podcasting, I was a big fan of this, and I'm still a big fan of this. It's the Fifine pod microphone, pretty much podcast microphone. This thing's like 80 bucks on Amazon. It's decent. We've ultimately upgraded in the studio. You'll see we have all the same microphones, and that is the Shure SM7B. This is what Joe Rogan uses. This is what all the big podcasts use. This is kind of what people are used to seeing. This one is great if you're just starting out or if you're on a budget for $80. This thing's gonna get a really great sound. Now, the one thing I do not like about this microphone in particular is you can see on the front there's this button here, and that is a mute button, which when I'm like adjusting my microphone, it's kind of like right on the front. And so like I actually have this microphone at home in my home studio that I use all the time. But when I'm adjusting it, I accidentally push that button. And I have recorded so many podcasts where I like adjust my mic, record the whole thing, look, and it was muted. And it is just killer. So if you have this and you don't want that problem, this capability is only available if you have this plugged in via USB-C. But if you're going to use an XLR cable, which it also takes XLR cable, then that feature's disabled. You won't have to worry about it. So I typically use XLR cables to run this at home. It's a good quality mic, but overall, I think this it's not like insane. Maybe like 20, maybe 30 if you're pushing it, like 20% sound quality improvement on this thing. But it looks more professional, and you never have to worry about stuff. Sometimes with that microphone, I would throw it through, like Adobe Audio Enhancer or something like that. This is just perfect. I mean, any like AI audio thing is like trained off of this microphone. So this is the best microphone to use. The cables that we are using for most of these microphones, I go with the Mogami cables. These are more expensive. They're not necessary. Actually, I'm recording right now just off of, I believe, like an Amazon Basics cable or something. I don't think the quality sounds too much different. You do need to make sure that you get the right kind of cable that I believe it's called like protected. Essentially what happens is sometimes if you get really cheap cables and the cable crosses, it can have some interference or buzzing sound that you want to avoid. Mogami definitely avoids that. It's the best, but it's also expensive. So I don't know if you necessarily have to get Mogami. That's probably one place you could cheap out a bit as long as you're getting a fairly decent quality cable. The other thing I wanted to mention is how this whole desk is put together. So the first thing you'll notice is right here, we have the ATEM Mini Pro ISO. The ATEM makes a great product, and I think Rode even has a new video tool like this that you can get, but we've been a big fan of the ATEM. The Mini has worked well for us. It can have 4 camera inputs. We only run 3 cameras on our podcast setup. The thing to note with this is it only has one USB out. So we have a cable right here that runs to our hard drive. So everything we're recording right now goes straight to the hard drive. The reason you'd want to do this versus a computer is if your computer crashes or shuts down, your like whole thing gets wiped or shut off, whereas a hard drive, that's not going to happen. So we typically record everything to a hard drive, plug it into a computer, and send it to our clients after the fact. So that's how that works. But this only has one USB out. So if you want to do it where you're like live streaming on Riverside or interviewing a guest on Riverside, but you also want to simultaneously be saving it to a hard drive, you can't do that with the ATEM Mini Pro ISO, but you can do it with the regular ATEM Pro ISO. So it has an extra spot, but it's just I think it's like $400 more. And it also can do 2 extra cameras, so 6 camera angles. Really depends what you're going to do. For us, this just works most of the time, and we've been happy with it. This has, like I mentioned, 4 camera inputs, so you're just able to swap between the different camera angles here. So if someone's recording live, we have one of our studio managers switching between camera angles of the guest. And yeah, we've been a huge fan of the ATEM Mini Pro ISO. Lots of cool features, lots of stuff. So all the cameras plug into this. Over here, we have the Rodecaster Pro 2. Now, I've actually heard other people say like, oh, I don't need the Rodecaster Pro 2. There's an older version, which is, I believe, just a Rodecaster. And they're like, we're just sticking with the one. The reason why, especially if you're starting out, I highly recommend going with the Rodecaster Pro 2. The regular Rodecaster, the first one they came out with, did not have cloud lifters built in, or I believe it's called preamps. Cloud lifter might be the brand. It didn't have preamps built in. So you had to actually have a preamp, which is like essentially a little box, which is between the microphone and everything else you have plugged in, and making sure that your audio can get high enough. That's super annoying. And those things can cost like $100, $120 each, depending on what brand you go with. And if you have 4 microphones, that could be like $400, $500. This thing is, I think, like $800 new or used or whatever. And so it didn't make sense to get a version that you like half of the cost you're gonna have to spend on preamps. So you might as well just spend the extra couple $100 and get the Rodecaster Pro 2. It's got all the preamps built in. The audio sounds fantastic. I love it. So right in the back of the Rodecaster, you have 4 different mics to plug in, which is important to know, right? We have 3 camera angles and 4 microphones for this setup. We then have a cable that will take all of that audio and plug it into the ATEM Mini Pro ISO. So essentially this is getting, you can record like all the individual tracks over here if you put like a SD card in here or something, and we have that right now, I think, going. But what we typically will do and give to clients is all of this audio is adjusted here by, so, if someone's talking really loud, you can turn them down. If someone's talking really quiet, you can turn them up. So we adjust all of this live, so it's just how we like. The audio is going straight into here, and it's combining the audio and the video and then putting that into the hard drive. So they're getting like the full, totally edited, everything put together. They get a version of that with every recording, and it's a lot easier because if there was nothing in the interview that they needed to like edit, it's ready to go. They could post it right away pretty much. The other thing to note is that the ATEM Mini Pro ISO stands for isolated files. So they have like an ATEM Pro or ATEM Mini that is not ISO. You want to get the ISO, in my opinion, because what it's actually doing is getting isolated files from each of your different camera angles. So if someone's like live cutting it and switching between camera angles and they, accidentally left it on one for too long and you want to go back and like fix it because it wasn't showing the person that was talking. With the isolated files, you have everyone's individual isolated files. You can put them all together. If a camera dies and goes black and that's on your like main edit, or I don't know, some sort of issue happens, you can't fix it if you don't have the ISO files. So I recommend getting the isolated files when you're recording with this. So yeah, ATEM Mini Pro ISO it works great for pretty much all of that. The other thing we have here is a monitor on a swivel. This is something that I highly recommend. I know some people just have like a stand that it's attached to or a stand on the table. I love having this swivel because we can turn this thing all the way around and essentially swivel it around and just show it to the guests. So when they're sitting down and they're like, oh, like, how do we look and stuff? You flip this around and be like, yeah, you guys are looking great. And they can see it on the screen. They're happy. And then you go with the recording. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of having this on a swivel. The laptop here is just some cheap laptop. This is not fancy in any way, shape, or form. The main reason we have this laptop is that it is connected to the A10 Mini Pro. It's got all of the same settings pretty much here, but it also lets you name the files and do some like live streaming stuff and different settings that you're going to want here. If nothing else to name the files, we have this on. We always have this on here. We also use this laptop on here for doing test recording. So right before we run a recording, we're like, okay, everyone say mic check 1, 2. We plug it in and we just make sure, you know, like our guys are pretty good. We just make sure that all the audio, all the video, everything's synced up and perfect before we run through a recording. So in order to connect a laptop, this is the one tricky thing I had to figure out, was the control that connects the A10 Mini Pro to a computer is a Ethernet cable, essentially. And so there's no Ethernet plug on this laptop. So I just got a converter, like a little dongle off of Amazon that plugs an Ethernet cable in, and that plugs in via USB, and that works fine. It connects it great once you do that. So that's just something to be aware of, is you'll probably want to grab one of these if your laptop or whatever your device is doesn't have an Ethernet plug-in. Okay, one of the most annoying things about recording that I found, especially if you're sitting there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours for an interview, is your headphones. I've used so many headphones. Case in point, the M Audios here. We have these for guests if they want them. I would say 99% of our recordings, they don't care for headphones. So I kind of cheaped out on these, to be honest, because no one really uses them. And so, but at least it gives me a good example of what I would recommend not getting for the main booth. So these are not super comfortable. They do the job, but they're not super comfortable. The problem is if you're sitting there for 3 hours live editing someone and your ears hurt, that just sucks. So the headphones that I have found that honestly are the most comfortable, I probably purchased 5 premium studio headphones and tested out a bunch of different stuff, is these headphones out of Bayer Dynamics. They're the DT990 Pros. These things are amazing. This is the limited edition black. That's not necessary. I think they make a gray version. But anyways, these things are super, super comfortable. This is metal here, so it's very durable. You can remove this if it gets old and nasty and dirty, and put on, you know, a new padding here. Super comfortable. The holes for your ears, really big. The sound quality is incredible. It's pass-through, so this is not a solid back. You can kind of hear some of the ambiance in the room around you. Yeah, and mostly these things are comfortable. They don't hurt your ears. I tried 100 pairs. This was the best. If you just want to buy the right pair the first time, I would highly recommend these. Like, as far as price goes, yeah, there's like probably better ones that are more expensive, but like for the price and getting something really decent, I would highly recommend that. When it comes to the actual hard drive that we use to do all of this recording, there's a bunch of different ones I've tried. SanDisk makes a good one. This is just a 2 terabyte T7 Shield from Samsung. I've actually heard people say like, oh, I don't like the T7s. I want like the older versions because they say these things have problems. We have never had a problem with this hard drive. It's worked fantastic. We also have a SanDisk one that works great as well. If anything, these are sometimes a little too small at 2 terabytes. So we have a much bigger, I believe like 500 terabytes or something, drive that when these things fill up from recordings, we just offload everything there and try to keep these ones clear and clean for all of our new, recordings and guests. So I think that's a basic overview of most everything that we have on the top of the desk. The next thing I want to talk about is what we have going on underneath of the desk here. So underneath the desk, we have a power bar that everything is, I just have this thing mounted straight to the bottom of the desk. That's a nice thing. It's solid wood, so you could pretty much screw anything in. This is a power strip here. I believe the brand is Belkin. But we have all of the fans, all of the cameras, all of the everything is just mounted underneath. And then the other thing that's fantastic is we have a basket on the front of the desk where all the cables are in. We're always working on our cable management, trying to clean this thing up, but all the cables are in here. So anyways, between the two of those, we keep everything off the ground so that when we want to roll this thing into a new room, everything's good to go. We essentially unplug it from the wall, put that cable on the desk, and we just roll it in the other room and no problems. The one other thing we have mounted to the front of the table that I would recommend is a clock that essentially tells our guests the time, or we can have a timer so they know how long their session is. If you have people back to back, you need to keep everyone on track of time, that I would just recommend having something like that. So this is our studio set 2, and there's a couple interesting things here that I wanted to go over. One of the first things is that we actually use this overhead fan that was already here as a light. Oftentimes it helps light the room, and it's it was actually good. The problem was that the light bulbs, if you have the wrong type of LED light bulb, you've probably seen it in videos before, but it adds like a subtle flickering to the video that will drive you crazy. So we actually had to go and get specific light bulbs to install here. Now, if you don't know exactly which light bulbs, essentially the problem is like the wavelengths of light mess up with the camera, and that creates the flickering. So the easiest way that I found to find the exact light bulbs that would work, I went to Home Depot and they have all of the light bulbs on display. If you take out your phone and you put it in slow-mo and just take a video of all the lights on display in slow-mo, and then play it back, you'll see which ones are solid and which ones like flicker. It looks like a strobe, it's flashing. That was the easiest way for me to figure it out. So I actually had to switch out all the lights in the whole house to be that way to avoid that kind of flickering. And I even found that if I have like a TV screen in front of the set for people to look at, if it's really light and really white, that LED coming off the TV screen can also have the same effect. So I typically try to get people to put any texts or prompts or scripts on a black background in a notes app or something to also mitigate that. So that's something to be aware of. We have these newer lights that we also use for hair lights or key lights, and they work great. I keep them on stands. Maybe someday I'll do something similar to our Studio One with a bar on the ceiling to mount them to, but at the moment they're not too in the way. Another thing that I wanted to mention is when we're doing the podcasts, we use these Gator Frameworks stands that I'm a huge fan of. Essentially, the microphone will just attach, snap on right like that, and you can have this in front of someone. The nice thing about this specific one, we change the direction of the table or the chairs depending on kind of the conversation we're gonna have, but what I like about these is that you can move them off to the side, and if someone's sitting here with the microphone coming in from this way, and you have a camera coming from facing them, it doesn't get in front of them. So we have other mic stands that look a little bit more traditional that sit in front of them, but if there's a camera coming from the front and this microphone stands here, sometimes it's in the way. So sometimes it's nice to have this stand off to the side. And the only thing you gotta be aware of is making sure that it's balanced, because the way the base goes, it's great at not tipping over forward because it's long, but if you're gonna try to do it sideways, it can tip over that way. So just something to be aware of with the stands. One other thing I wanted to talk about is the backdrop here. Everything here, the backdrop, we have kind of this like oriental room divider that I just purchased on Amazon. And we've done a bunch of different setups where we have lights behind it that can make it glow. We can do some cool things. So those are really great. And then having some sort of green foliage in the background behind the people has a really nice shot. Another thing that we did is we have just this, it's like a junky old dresser drawer side table thing here. And depending on the shot that we're going for, oftentimes we'll have a camera from facing the person at this seat, and it hits right behind them. We found that this white wall was just kind of boring, so we moved this behind them to add a little bit of character. And we've also put plants back here as well to kind of have something behind them. So that's something that you can be aware of. But overall, people like this table. It's kind of a more small, compact table, and that makes it a little bit easier for the shots versus like a really long table. It's hard to kind of get everyone in them. So in the studio right now, we have a number of different lights. You'll notice that I have quite a contraption going up on the ceiling right here. This used to be a fan. The fan was always kind of in the way. And so I removed the fan and replaced it with this, I believe this is like a gas or electric pole from Home Depot that I just mounted to some studs. And then we get these small rig clamps that just clamp straight onto it. And they attach to all of the lights. So this has been amazing because we can also get all of the cables. We have a power strip up there. And I replaced the fan with a bulb that has an outlet on it, and all of the lights are plugged into that. So essentially what happens is, because the fan used to be on a switch, I hit the switch once and all the lights in the studio come on. This has been a lifesaver because in the past, when we first got started, it was like, okay, someone's gonna record, and you go around and plug and turn on every single light in the whole studio, and then when you have to leave for the day, you gotta turn every single thing off. It's just kind of a hassle and it takes some time. So now on one switch, this saves us a ton of time. This light that we have right here, this thing is fantastic. It's adjustable. You can move it around. You can see it's on a bit of a swivel right now. I'll pull up the brand on Amazon, but I believe it's a Raylino spotlight. And then attached to it, we have a GVM lantern box. This thing's awesome. The lighting is great in the studio. Typically, this is actually quite a bit brighter, but because I'm walking around the studio right now, it kind of messes up the shot. And so due to that, we have it turned down right now. But the other thing that you'll notice is running off of all the same stuff, we have two just kind of like older panel lights. They're GVM panel lights, and we use these as hair lights that go behind the guests over here and on the couch. The one other thing that we do, we just have regular lamps or side table lamps over behind the side of the couch and in the fireplace. The fireplace one, it kind of makes it look like there's a fire. It glows there. The one beside the couch makes it light up the side of the wall. And so when we have our camera angle shot from the side of the studio hitting the guests there's kind of a glow behind them, which looks kind of nice. So, and then of course we just have plants for a little bit of, just for the background. And then we have some other like elements that are great. The one thing that I'll say is when you get your side tables, it is a little bit tricky to find a perfect side table that is not going to tip over. This one, for example, I just like the look of the side table and I'm like, oh, you could clamp something on, but it would tip over when we would pull these fully extended because these are kind of heavy to pull it over. So I have the back of it just filled up with, I believe, sandbags and rocks. So that's something that you'll want to look at. Likewise, sometimes when we have a third mic for the couch, we strap it to this table right here. And so you want to make sure that your table's pretty solid. This one is decent, but it definitely could be heavier. As far as the decor in this whole place, we got regular couches. Most of the cool side tables are all from Ross. The plants that we have here are all from Ross as well. Although I believe I got this one on Amazon. So you get some stuff from Amazon, stuff from Ross. And then the wall back here, you can get like their sound panel wood slat walls on Amazon. They're a ton of money. I think it's like $300 for a handful of panels. This is gonna be way too much to do the whole wall. So I actually just got, these are wood strips from Home Depot. I think it might be $2 a strip or something. I can't remember, but essentially we just painted the wall black and then put these on, and it's got a really good look. The one thing that we do in all of our studio sets is try to put a shaggy rug down just to help absorb some of the sound. The couches are great for that. The rug is great for that. We have curtains. Wherever you can, try to put like fabric on the walls, sound panels, that kind of stuff. Absorbs the sound and it just sounds a lot better. Okay, so this is our studio set 3, and this has got a fun vibe. It's got the pink wall and it's got kind of these wood rainbows. We got these from Facebook Marketplace from, I believe, a company that makes them for like weddings and stuff. So they just cranked them out. One thing that was a little tricky was this light strip that we attached. There's 2 different kinds of light strips. Ones that will have the light shining towards you. You want to avoid that because it looks kind of weird on the camera. It picks it up funny. So we have one with the light coming out of the top. I believe we got this from either Walmart or Amazon. I'd have to double check. But either way, they both have some good options. All of the furniture that we have here, I think it was like Facebook Marketplace, Ross, Amazon. And we always put a rug down in every room. It looks nice, but also it helps absorb some of the sound. So that's been great for us. And the one other thing that we did in this set is sometimes people want a slightly different set. So we have this photo paper wall that essentially you can pull down, kind of give a bit of a different background if you want. And the other thing that this is great for is if people need to take pictures for thumbnails or for podcast covers, we pull this down and you can take a picture on this and kind of have a really blank wall that's easy to cut themselves out again. So for both of those things, that's been fantastic. The one other thing that's been big in this, literally big in this set, is our ginormous light that we have here. This light has been amazing. It is, I'll throw it up on the screen, but it's a GVM spotlight. And then it has this giant, typically it's a Godox attachment, and it has like an egg crate that can go on it, but typically we don't have it on there, but it's a light diffuser and it's huge, but it does an amazing job. And the lighting looks perfect for pretty much whoever you have it on. This is just like a massive diffuser. And because of that, you can turn this spotlight up to be super bright without, having just like the glaring harsh light on your skin. So overall, this has been amazing and helps the set look super good. If you are interested in starting your own podcast or your own studio, I have a full podcast course where I break down every piece of equipment I use. I break down everything that I've done to grow my podcasts from 0 to over 4 million downloads. And not just the equipment or the setup, but the marketing channels, the ways that I've grown, the SEO, how I get guests on, how I record literally every aspect of podcasting to essentially go from 0 to 4 million, I cover in my podcasting course. So there's a link in the description where you can check that out. If you have any other questions about podcasting, I'm over on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. I'm excited to hear whatever projects you're working on. Drop a comment on the YouTube video. I'm excited to hear about your podcast and what you plan on recording.